Hello, welcome back. This is actually our final episode of this season of the Reflect Now podcast. I'm excited that you're here. Let's do it. I'm joined today, and I'm very excited that she is wrapping up the series, but I'm joined by Tarryn Evenwel, and she is in our church, so welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
If people don't know who you are, give us the quick 30-second intro.
I'm now, I would say, Josie Bird. I've been here since 2012, so loving Johannesburg. I'm an auntie, a friend, a running enthusiast, and a God follower. So yeah, that's me.
Amazing. I hate running. I will never do it. I only run in sport. Like, I have to be running after something. I can't just run in general. Doesn't happen.
No, I've done some crazy stuff this year already.
Yeah, no, you're one of those people.
Yeah.
But it does become that. So as you know, we spoke about it before. We always start every episode to get the conversation going, to break the ice a bit. We start with a little game, 2 truths, 1 lie. I am 3 for 3.
Nah, let me see if I can break that
season.
streak.
So you could potentially break the streak, and we'll see how it goes. But give us 3 things. 2 of them about you are true, and 1 is a complete and utter false lie. And I have to pick out which one it is. 3, 2, 1, go.
Right. First, I have been to the furthest point in South America and climbed a glacier.
Okay.
I am an auntie to 2, and I have run 3 marathons this year already.
This year already. Okay, so auntie is true. Is it a 2? See, you're trying to trip me up here. Okay, I'm just gonna go with that. That's true. Is that correct?
No.
Oh, C, failed. So wait, okay, so definitely have been to Upper Glacier.
Yeah.
Southernmost point
Yeah,
of
Ushuaia.
South.
I've been to Ushuaia.
Didn't even know. I'll probably have to Google it after this to
Yeah,
just check.
so
But I'll believe
I traveled
you.
around South America for 2 months on my own.
So then, how many are you onto?
10.
Jeepers.
My brother has got a few kids.
Okay, well, to be fair,
Yeah,
I
so
don't
you
know
don't know
all
my-
10.
yeah, no,
I don't know all
no,
10.
no.
So
it
was
was
definitely a trick
It was
out.
a little bit trick out, but that's the whole point.
Okay, I got 75% on this season, but it's a fun way to start. We are, I'll give you a bit of a brief of where we are. We are actually at the M.E.S shelter. It's in Jeppestown. And it's an amazing, we do actually as a city even have a connection here. Last year, we were joined by about 100. Some coming from here, some coming from other shelters that you're involved with, where we got to put on the Christmas table, a Christmas meal for people who otherwise wouldn't have that kind of experience, and we just got to love on them, bless them, bring them over to City Green, have a dinner. It was possibly one of my favorite things from last year. It was amazing.
And it changed. I promise you, for many of those clients that are here, they'd never experienced that kind of love. So even still now, they will come up and mention that they'd never been loved at a church like that. So
and we're
kudos to
building the
City.
excitement because it definitely will happen again.
Yeah.
And so we'll watch out for that. That's going to be amazing. Hopefully it can be far more than 100, do even more. But I love, you just mentioned it now. And so why not just give us kind of the brief around your role, what this organization is looking to do, be involved in, and just kind of the brief. I know it's huge and there's so much to do, but what you guys are actually involved in.
So M.E.S stands for Mold, Empower, Serve. So M.E.S has been around for 35 years.
Wow.
So it's quite a substantial amount of time. And really the whole aspect of M.E.S is to change the hearts of the city. So you would have heard me mention clients before. So for us, it's how do we change the heart of the city serving the community? So that would be the homeless, the early childhood centers, the after school program. It's the vulnerable community. It's people who need training, all of that. So it's kind of how we work together. So my role is quite a new role that's been kind of put here because there's obviously a lot of programs. So my role is focus group for youth and adults at risk manager. So we have shelters, we have training center, we have a health aspect because obviously clients need healthcare. So we partner with clinics around to be able to refer people there. We've also got our GROW program, which is a job rehabilitation program. So I think it's important to know that as you're journeying with people, like if somebody is on the street, they've ended up on the street because of something, and then wanting to take them off, firstly, they need to be ready to take that step. And with that, it's not just 1, 2, 3, and the person is, I'm fine, and I can just kind of carry on with life. So we really look at all those aspects and really tackle like the basic needs, having a roof over your head, having somewhere to shower, and having a belly full of food. Having those things kind of focused first makes a big difference. M.E.S is a Christian-based organization, so it really is incredible, and absolutely you see God moving all the time. So we know that a lot of stuff that we're doing just wouldn't even begin to happen if God didn't have his hand on M.E.S. So we're here in Joburg, Kempton Park, PE, and Cape Town.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
And we get to see, there's obviously so much need and so much that goes on with those who are vulnerable, who are needing help. But on the other side, I know there'll be probably a lot of people listening to this right now, who have a heart to help, to help someone who is homeless, to help someone who is in a vulnerable space, someone who maybe, has hit that rock bottom or has been on that journey for quite a while. You working in the space where you're actually like seeing the successes and the failures and the wins and losses, and even sometimes some of the like traps that in helping you're not really helping, or you're not really understanding the full situation in. What do you wish people knew about helping if they've got a heart for it? What do you wish they knew about like their next step or what they can actually do?
So I think firstly, the sort of that guy or lady that you're passing at the traffic light every single day when you are on your way to work, I would say like you think giving your 5 Rand or 10 Rand is going to make a difference to get them off. It creates a dependency. So it's not actually helping that person. So it's really, and I know it's bigger and daunting, and there aren't huge, there's not everywhere organizations that are doing what we're doing, but there are plenty organizations. So I think the first thing is get to know the person. The impact by just actually you taking the time to get to know that person's name, where they're from, will build a relationship with that person. And ultimately, I think it's also always to remember that it's God and that person's journey. So that person has to ultimately be ready. So, I mean, I've already through City as well connected with individuals who want, like they've seen somebody, they want to help that person get off the street, and we're like, cool, at that time there happens to be a space at the shelter, you can sponsor, we've got like voucher booklets, so you can sponsor to have someone have a night's accommodation, a meal, and a clean shower. So that's like basic things being met, but that person may not be ready. And I think it's also important to know that don't be discouraged by that. So many times it's a long journey. It's definitely not an instant fix. But I think it's also educating yourself, and it's not, yes, we need financial support. So that is a reality. There are things that need to be paid for and bought and all that, lights, electricity, water, food, all those things, but also giving of your time. So if God has put that on your heart, like explore it, like you'd be surprised. And it may be that it's only for a month, or maybe God does something else and you end up like doing something more. So I mean, I think of myself, like I've always been doing stuff. When I heard Shelly and Ryan share on Cherished, so I've been part of the team nearly 8 years now. Wow. And when I heard it, I was like, oh, that's nice. And like Shelly and I still joke about it, because I was like, I don't think that's for me. And I think that was like on the Monday. And by the Thursday, I was like, okay, so I'm in. And God just changed something in my heart. But I know it's not for everybody. And I think that's so important to know, that God also stirs and changes people's hearts to be the person at that time. And that's, I think, so hopefully I've answered your question.
No, definitely. I want to speak about your heart, and just what do you if you had to tell someone kind of the journey God's brought you on at a heart level for you, having been obedient to what he's calling, helping in many different things, helping here, helping at Cherished, seeing great success stories, but then even the ones that didn't go great, and what impact that has all had. What's that journey looked like for you, even at a heart level, as God's been working? Because I think it's so important whenever you get into anything that's having an impact, leaving a legacy, talking about the purpose or something that God's starting in your heart. It's most of the time we don't necessarily track that journey, but I'd love to hear more about yours.
Yeah, I mean, I think my journey with God has been like I knew of God as a youngster, kind of like all that stuff. Then finished school, was a bit of a wild card, whatever. And I went to London, did the whole working holiday, and kind of he's always been there. And I know he's always been looking after me. And I've had encounters with him, but then kind of, you try and do it in your own way. And I think I remember when it came for me to come back to Joburg. And it's interesting because I'm also like, is Joburg still this season? And I'm like, so it's all these things that are happening. But for me, I think God has looked after me and has been there. Has he answered all the dreams and desires? No, not yet, but he's given me promises. And I think for me, that's where that heart aspect comes in, is to say, right now in this season, I'm using you to do this, but your promises are going to come through. And I was listening to Dekelo's Story of Hope earlier in the week as well, and I was like, thank you for just hearing that again, just confirms remember those promises that you have been given by God, and what is happening. And it's an up and a down, but he's constant. And I think that's what we've got to remember. And also we're not faultless. So I definitely don't have it all together. I'm still learning and working along the way. And he says it's okay because he's with you. So I think we put so much pressure on ourselves that we've got to tick this box, this box, this box, this box. And I catch myself falling into that. And then God will say, no, my girl, that's not what I want for you. You need to remember this. You need to remember how much I love you, and I've got plans for you, and I hear you and I see you. So, I think that's that whole journey. And I think being a Christian is not 1, 2, 3. It's having that active relationship. And I think really pressing in when you don't know, I'll turn to the word. I'll turn to prayer, because that's honestly, and I don't always have the answers, but he surprises you, and he'll give you that moment of comfort. And I think that's where that heart is then surrounded and felt of who he is.
Amazing. I think you're touching on some important stuff, and maybe you have, maybe you haven't. But it says in the word that hope deferred makes the heart grow sick. And I think one of the things you've touched on that protects that is when you remember the promises of God, when you lean into him, when you lean into it being a relationship, that's going to have ups and downs, or moments where you have a lack of clarity and it's a bit of chaos and confusion. It protects us against going to that space where there's hope deferred. And that might be within ourselves, but then the other side, and you spoke about it earlier, is even if you have this heart to help someone and they're not quite ready to receive that help or take that next step, don't be disappointed with that, because you've done your part and they might just not be ready yet. How do you think are there any other ways that you've seen that is important to not ever move into that kind of hope deferred space, or where your heart would just get bitter, or where you just even in the moments where maybe you want to just pack it up and be like, this, I don't even know if this is making that much of a difference?
I think it's a tough thing to not get to that point, but and maybe I'm really, really lucky where I'm at. But I really see God the whole time. I see him doing stuff daily, and with people who I've got to know, and how God then connects. Just to share that story, one of the ladies through Cherished, we've been journeying with somebody from church. We've been journeying with her for nearly 2 and a bit years before she was ready to take that step. And God knew that was coming, because he'd already, in March last year, I started helping her. So then when this lady was ready to kind of take that next step, she needed to go somewhere. And it wasn't where she could go in terms of our normal restoration. So I think you think it's not possible for him to be solving something completely impossible. he can. Like I don't know, like and so I hold on to that, because I feel like for me personally, I'm like, yeah, I've got things that I would love, like I want to be married and all those kind of things, and it hasn't happened. And like you kind of question with God, like, well, what is happening? What do I still need to work on? What do I need to do? And I am working on those things in like my personal time. But in the same breath, he's like, but look at what this can happen. And it hasn't been 1, 2, 3. It's happened over 3 years, or you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I think that's the whole thing. It's not just 1, 2, 3. There's 1.1 and then 2.3 and then kind of stuff. And you've got to go with it and be open to it and really push in when you see, and when you're not, just to have accountability and a team around. And I think that's so key, having community. So like the community that I have surrounding me will remind me of those moments, because, you know, sometimes you can just be self-reflecting and you're like, oh, nothing's happening. It's not, and they're like, well, what about this? Or what about that? And yeah.
It's amazing, because sometimes you get in that space where it's like all you can see is the bad, or you can see is the lack, and then you miss out on those little green shoots that are there, and God's actually working and moving in those. And the other things will come in their time. I wanted to talk more. So you mentioned that lady story. I'd love you to like fill in the blanks for us.
Cool.
But you spoke about like it's important, and we see you guys literally doing it, getting those basic things just out of the way, almost, to be like, we'll put a roof over your head, we'll put food in your belly, we will help you with those basic things. But then you guys have a whole kind of philosophy and structure and programs to add other things on top of that, and really help people take those next steps. Because your whole, you said it when we were talking before, this is temporary. This is always supposed to be temporary. We want to set people up for what's next. So maybe tell us a bit more about that process and how that all works, and really what you guys do.
So obviously when we get a client that comes in, we do an assessment to find out how they've ended up where they have. So how they were like on the streets, or whether they've run away from home, or what has been the case. So we've got our social work services department. So our social worker will assess and work with that. But what I think is also stands out for me, it's not just one person. So you've got a social worker, you've got the caretaker, who's somebody who's here the whole time, who's also building relationship. You've got our unit care manager, who kind of doesn't just work with this shelter, with another shelter. So it's looking at it holistically to say, okay, where's this person at? What do they need in terms of mental well-being? I think COVID has just like exasperated that, like in a very real sense. And I think people came to Joburg, city of gold, opportunity. They've lost their jobs through COVID and just don't feel like they can go back home. So there's that journey aspect as well, to kind of build that person up and help with those family reunifications and stuff. And then it's to see, okay, well, we've got our training center, which does like a basic life skills course, which I think you think, but it really is quite, when you've been on the streets, when you, like for you and me, like we had an appointment at 10 o'clock, you were here at 10 o'clock. For somebody who's been on the streets, that can be a foreign aspect to understand. So working together to say, right, you need to be presentable. So you need to have cleaned yourself. You need to be at your appointments on time. You need to commit that it's going to be 2 weeks every day from 9 till 1 o'clock. And for us, for you and me, it would just come naturally. For somebody who hasn't had that frame of reference, it's not an easy thing. So we journey and we kind of really work with the clients to say, right, this is how you need to start approaching it. So we've also got GROW, which is a job rehabilitation program. So they get a small stipend and they get like a 4-hour shift, because often for somebody who's come off the streets, they can't just get back on and go like a full day work from a mental, like it's just like there's triggers, there's all that like aspects to take into account. So you've got all these programs that collectively, work that. Then we've got our feeding scheme. So we do a feeding scheme on a Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And through that, who's also been here for ages, builds a relationship. We give a meal, and we've just had an intake of some of the guys that he'd been kind of building a relationship with for, say, maybe the last 2-3 months. They're like, okay, I'm ready to take that step. God had made a way that we'd exited some clients, so those clients can come here. They're now busy doing life skills. They're going to do a security course. And so those are steps for them to then be able to get back on their feet. So it's touching on all those kind of programs. And what's really incredible, and I know like we have our ups and downs with our governments, what COVID has highlighted and government has realized that there is a real issue with homelessness, that it is a big struggle. And so they have noticed, and they are now working with the likes of NPOs that have been on the ground and doing so, trying to change, trying to learn more, and saying, right, well, how do we work together to solve this, together with corporates and churches and partners and that kind of stuff. So,
amazing.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you a last question, but before we get there, if anyone really does want to get involved, help, whatever that looks like, what are the best ways to serve you and this organization?
So obviously we've got, depending on where your heart is, we've got our early childhood centers, we've got after school programs, we've got our shelters. So depending on where your heart is and what your capacity is, we need hands on deck. So if you are a person who's got some flexibility and would love to serve the homeless in terms of feeding, Mondays, Wednesdays and Fridays in the morning, you could put aside one morning and come and do that. So physically, like having hands. If you have entrepreneurial skills, we've through this lockdown period, we've realized these clients can sew, crochet, do beadwork and that, but they now need the help to kind of get that as a business up and running. So if that's something that like resonates with you, it's not so scary. I'm sure you guys drove here today. It wasn't so bad to get
Not
to.
bad at all.
So we are lucky where our shelter is. This particular shelter, it's not in the heart of Hillbrow. So if you are worried about that kind of security aspect, we have got security here, so that physically coming through, and also just building relationships. So if you want to do a Bible study, there's that opportunity. So it doesn't have to be financial. It can just also be where God has put your heart and where you want to give the time. So I'm happy. I'll give my email address and I can put you in contact depending on which program kind of stands out to you. If you know, like in October is World Homelessness Month. So something, if you want to kind of, we do different campaigns every month. We can share that with you. So, and it's also to look at what's happening in your community, because maybe there's something happening in your space that you're not aware of that also need the hands and the feet.
Yeah.
So don't be overwhelmed. Like, just take the step.
There's a step for every single one of us, as we always say. We'll make sure we put all those details in the link, so just look out for that. Tarryn, final conversation. I think I'm just so struck, even just being here from when we walked in till now. I think God's burdened your heart for this, and I just watch you in so many different places, caring for people, helping people, loving on people, and really shining Jesus' light in wherever you are. And I love that you will be vulnerable. Like, I don't always have it together, but I do still want to honor like the blessing that you are. And give you the last question, which is just, what would you encourage people with, seeing almost the hopelessness that you see, and yet knowing the hope that you have in Jesus and what that's changed in you. But just any last encouragement.
Yeah, I think to also look in your direct circle. I think one thing that stood out for me here is the mental aspect, and people feeling desperate, alone. And I know we've kind of, as a church, have done some series and touched on it, but I think it really is a reality. And like, people may seem like they've got it all together, have it 1, 2, 3. I want to encourage to probe. Don't just leave it. Like, if God's given you that nudge, like, follow it through, because that person may be needing you. So it could just be you reaching out to someone in your circle and just loving on that person, and that can change the trajectory of where that person is at. So like, I think there's such power in that, and to do that, like, be brave and vulnerable and ask God, like, in your circle, who is it? And through that, I feel like God will show you other opportunities. So we need to work on our communities as well, because if we can show those examples, it then reflects. And I mean, I know you touched about the Christmas thing. It really did reflect the dinner that City hosted, and how people looked in the eye and acknowledged that person
Yeah.
and loved on that person, that is who Jesus is. And Jesus was in the grimy, dirty places. So it's not for everyone, but God can use you in that. But God can also use you in incredible, glamorous places as well. But like, be pushing in to and encouraging those and checking in on those around you. I think it's very critical right now, because I think there's a lot more people that are battling with depression, anxiety, and all of that. And there's still such a stigma.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's something that I would encourage people.
Definitely. We always want to be bringing help to everyone that's around us, help for ourselves, making sure we're sorted, but then asking the questions that Jesus is really nudging us to ask. Tarryn, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to M.E.S for hosting us. We have reached the end of season 2 of the Reflect Now podcast. I hope if you haven't caught all the episodes, catch up. As I always end with, if you've enjoyed this, if this has spoken to you, it's always good to share it with someone else, because we need to be having these kinds of conversations. They're so important. We'll see you next time. Have a great one.